The sky above the Talvine capital burned with orange fire. Lyra pressed her back against the crumbling wall and tried to steady her breathing. Her ears rang from the constant explosions. Smoke filled her lungs with each gasp. Around her, the city she had known since childhood lay in ruins. The Kralth had come 3 days ago. Their warships had appeared in orbit without warning, blocking out the sun with their massive hulls. The demands were simple. Surrender or die. The Talvine government had refused. They were a proud people who had never bowed to invaders. Now they were paying the price for that pride. Lyra looked down at the spear in her hands. The metal shaft was warm from her grip. Blue energy patterns ran along its length, flickering weakly. The weapon had belonged to her grandmother, and her grandmother's mother before that. 5 generations of warriors had carried this spear into battle. Now it would end with her. She could hear the Kralth soldiers approaching. Their heavy boots crunched through broken glass and debris. They were taking their time. They knew she was trapped. There was nowhere left to run. Behind her, in the collapsed remains of what used to be a school, 7 Talvine children huddled together in the darkness. They were all that remained of the evacuation group she had been assigned to protect. The others were dead. Her entire unit was dead. She was the last one standing between these children and the enemy. Lyra tightened her grip on the spear and stepped out from cover. The street before her was wide and filled with rubble. Kralth soldiers lined both sides, at least 30 of them. Their armor was black and red, designed to inspire fear. It worked, but Lyra had stopped running from her fear hours ago. The Kralth commander stepped forward. He was taller than the others, with additional armor plates and weapon systems built into his suit. He carried a plasma rifle that could cut through stone. His helmet retracted, revealing a face with too many teeth. "Talvine warrior," he said in her language, though his accent was thick and mocking. "You fight well. You lasted longer than the others. But this is over. Drop your weapon. We may let the young ones live." Lyra knew it was a lie. The Kralth did not take prisoners. They did not show mercy. Every world they conquered became a graveyard. "Come and take it," she said. The commander laughed. The sound was harsh and cold. He raised one hand and gestured. The soldiers on both sides began to move forward, closing the circle. Their weapons hummed with power. Ready to fire. Lyra planted her feet and held the spear ready. Her muscles ached. She had been fighting for 3 days with little food or sleep. Her armor was cracked in a dozen places. Blood from a dozen small wounds had dried on her skin. But her hands were steady. She would make her ancestors proud. The first Kralth soldier rushed her from the left. Lyra spun and drove her spear forward. The energy blade at its tip punched through his armor and into his chest. He fell. She pulled the weapon free and turned to face the next attacker. 2 more came at once. Lyra blocked the first with her spear shaft and kicked the second hard enough to crack his helmet. Her spear sang through the air, cutting and stabbing. 3 Kralth fell. Then 4, then 5. But there were too many. For every enemy she dropped, 2 more took his place. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder. Another hit her leg. She stumbled but kept fighting. The spear was an extension of her body, moving faster than thought. The commander watched with amusement. He was letting his soldiers tire her out. It was a game to him. Entertainment. Lyra's vision began to blur. Her arms felt like lead. The spear grew heavy in her hands. A Kralth soldier knocked her to her knees with a blow from behind. She struggled to rise. More blows rained down on her. Her armor cracked further. She could taste blood. Through sheer will, she pushed herself up one more time. The children were still behind her. Still alive. She could not fall. Not yet. The commander seemed to sense her determination. His amusement faded. He raised his plasma rifle and aimed it at her head. The other soldiers backed away, giving him a clear shot. "Enough," he said. "You die now. Then we take the children." Lyra saw her death in his eyes. She knew this was the end. But she would not die on her knees. With the last of her strength, she charged. Her feet pounded against the broken ground. The spear pulled back for one final strike. The commander did not move. He did not need to. At this range, he could not miss. Lyra thrust the spear forward with everything she had left. The energy blade struck the commander's chest armor. The impact sent shock waves up her arms. For one moment, she thought it would penetrate. For one moment, she believed she could win. Then the spear shattered. The ancient weapon, carried by 5 generations of warriors, broke apart in her hands. The metal shaft split in two. The energy core flickered and died. Pieces of the blade scattered across the ground like fallen stars. Lyra stood there, holding the broken remains. Her arms shook. Her legs could barely support her weight. The commander looked down at his chest armor. There was a small scratch where her spear had struck. Nothing more. He laughed again. This time, the other soldiers joined in. The sound echoed through the ruined street. Lyra fell to her knees. The broken spear slipped from her fingers. She had failed. The children would die. Her people would be forgotten. Everything she had fought for was gone. The commander raised his rifle one more time. His finger moved to the trigger. Lyra closed her eyes and thought of her family, her friends, all the people she had failed to save. She waited for the shot that would end her life. Instead, she heard an explosion. The blast was so loud it knocked her forward. Heat washed over her back. She opened her eyes and saw fire consuming the building to her left. Kralth soldiers were shouting and running in all directions. Smoke filled the air again, thicker than before. Through the chaos and flame, something fell from the sky. It was not a bomb. It was not debris. It was a person. The figure hit the ground between Lyra and the commander with enough force to crack the street. Dust and smoke swirled around the impact point. The Kralth soldiers raised their weapons, confusion replacing their confidence. The figure stood up slowly. It was tall and broad, wearing armor unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. The armor was dark, gray with blue lights running along the seams. A helmet covered the face completely. In one hand, the figure held a rifle. In the other, some kind of blade. The commander took a step back. His soldiers hesitated, unsure what they were facing. The figure turned its head toward Lyra. The helmet speakers crackled to life. A voice emerged, speaking perfect Talveen. The tone was calm, almost cheerful, as if the speaker had just arrived at a friendly gathering instead of a battlefield. Mind if I join the fight? The human moved before anyone could react. One moment he stood between Lyra and the Kralth commander. The next moment, he was already firing his weapon. The rifle made a sound like thunder. 3 Kralth soldiers fell before their bodies hit the ground. Jake Morrison had been watching the battle from above for the past 10 minutes. He had seen the Talveen warrior make her stand. Seen her fight against impossible odds. Seen her spear break. His orders had been to observe only, gather intelligence, do not engage. He had ignored those orders the moment he saw the children hiding in the rubble. Now he was committed. The Kralth commander recovered from his shock and opened fire. Jake moved faster than Lyra thought possible. He rolled to the side as plasma bolts tore through the space where he had been standing. His rifle came up again. 2 more shots. 2 more dead Kralth. Stay down, Jake said to Lyra without looking at her. His voice was steady. No fear. No hesitation. Lyra could only stare. She had never seen anyone move like this. The human was not faster than the Kralth. His armor was not stronger. His weapons were not more powerful. But the way he fought was different. Every movement had purpose. Every shot found its target. There was no wasted motion. No panic, just cold efficiency. A Kralth soldier charged from the left. Jake spun and drove his blade into the attacker's throat. The blade was shorter than Lyra's spear had been, but it cut through armor like paper. He pulled it free and fired his rifle at 2 more enemies in the same motion. The commander shouted orders. The Kralth began to coordinate their attack. They had been playing with Lyra. They were not playing anymore. 20 soldiers formed a line and fired together. The air turned bright with plasma bolts. Jake threw himself behind a pile of rubble. The plasma fire turned the ruins into molten slag. Lyra crawled toward him, keeping her head down. She could feel the heat from the weapons washing over her. "How many children?" Jake asked. He was checking his rifle, replacing the power cell with practiced ease. 7, Lyra managed to say. Her voice was rough from smoke and exhaustion. Jake nodded. He touched the side of his helmet and spoke in a language Lyra did not recognize. English. She had heard of it but never learned to speak it. His tone was calm, giving what sounded like a report. "Help is coming," he said to her in Talveen. "We just need to hold for 3 minutes." 3 minutes felt like forever with 20 Kroth soldiers trying to kill them. But Lyra had nothing left to lose. She picked up a plasma rifle from one of the dead Kroth and checked its charge. Still half full. Jake glanced at her and nodded with approval. "Stay close to me. When they push, we push back harder." The Kroth commander was losing patience. He ordered his soldiers forward in a mass charge. They came from 3 sides at once, firing as they ran. It should have been overwhelming. It should have been the end. Jake rose from cover and met them head-on. What happened next would stay with Lyra for the rest of her life. The human did not retreat, did not try to find better cover. He advanced into the enemy fire like he was walking through rain. His rifle barked continuously. His blade flashed in the light. Kroth soldiers fell around him like wheat before a scythe. Lyra followed, firing the plasma rifle. She was not as skilled with it as with her spear, but at this range, she did not need to be. The weapon kicked hard against her shoulder. Each shot drained energy, but the Kroth were falling. They were actually falling back. A massive roar split the air. 2 more figures fell from the sky, landing on either side of Jake. They wore the same gray armor, carried the same weapons. The cavalry had arrived. "About time," Jake said. His tone was light, almost teasing. "Traffic was bad," said one of the newcomers. A woman's voice. She fired her rifle at a group of Kroth trying to flank them. "You could have waited for us before starting the party." "Where's the fun in that?" Jake replied. The third human, a man, moved to cover the children. He knelt by the entrance to their hiding place and began scanning the area with his weapon. 7. Confirmed. All alive. No injuries. "Good," Jake said. "Katie, set up a perimeter. Ryan, get those kids to cover. We are going to be here a while. Oja, Katie, 200 and un." The woman, Katie, began pulling equipment from her armor, small devices that she placed in a circle around their position. Lyra watched as the devices activated, creating an energy barrier. It was weak, but it would stop at least some incoming fire. Ryan, the other man, spoke softly to the children in broken Talveen. His accent was terrible, but the children seemed to understand. They emerged from their hiding place one by one. Lyra felt a wave of relief. They were still alive. The Kroth had pulled back to a safe distance. They were regrouping. The commander was speaking into his communicator, no doubt calling for backup. This fight was far from over. Jake walked over to Lyra. Up close, she could see the details of his armor. It was covered in scratches and dents. This was not new equipment. This human had seen many battles before today. "Can you walk?" he asked. Lyra tested her leg. The plasma burn hurt, but it would hold. "Yes. Yes. Good." Jake reached to his belt and pulled out a combat knife. The blade was shorter than her broken spear, but it looked sharp and well made. He offered it to her. "Not as fancy as your spear, but it will get the job done." Lyra took the knife. It felt strange in her hand. Foreign, but it was a weapon, and she needed one. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You are not Talveen. This is not your fight." Jake tilted his head. Behind his helmet, she could not see his face, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "Someone once told me that there is no such thing as someone else's fight. Not when children are involved." Before Lyra could respond, Katie called out a warning. "Incoming." Lots of incoming. Lyra turned and felt her heart sink. The Kroth were not just regrouping. They were bringing everything they had. She could see at least 50 more soldiers. Heavy armor. Gun platforms. Even a small tank rolling down the street. Ryan checked his ammunition and swore in English. Even without understanding the words, Lyra knew what he meant. They were in trouble. Jake touched his helmet again and spoke rapidly in English. He was calling their ship, Lyra realized, asking for extraction. They would leave now and take the children to safety. It was the smart choice, the only choice that made sense. She heard a response come through his helmet speaker. The voice was male, older, and firm. Jake listened for a moment, then let out a short laugh. "What did they say?" Katie asked. "Captain says no extraction. We hold here. Fire support is coming." Jake checked his rifle and reloaded his blade. "Looks like we are staying for dinner, folks." Ryan moved to a better defensive position. "I hate it when he says that." Katie grinned behind her helmet. "At least it will not be boring." Lyra could not believe what she was hearing. They were staying. 3 humans against an army. For people they did not know. For children who were not their own. It made no sense. It was suicide, but they were smiling. The Kralth began their advance. The ground shook with the weight of their tank. Weapons charged. Orders were shouted. Death was coming. Jake looked at Lyra. "You know how to use that knife?" "Yes," Lyra said. She was surprised by the strength in her own voice. "Good," Jake said. "Because things are about to get interesting." 3 months earlier, on the Galactic Council station orbiting the neutral world of Proxima, Ambassador Lauren Hayes stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species. She was human, middle-aged, with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple dark suit with the emblem of Earth on her collar. Behind her, holographic displays showed images of her homeworld. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. "Honorable Council members," Lauren said, her voice clear and steady. "Humanity requests membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition. We believe our skills and resources would benefit the Alliance. We ask only for a chance to prove ourselves." The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate species of all shapes and sizes. Most of the representatives looked bored. A few seemed amused. The Kralth representative, a massive creature in ornate armor, laughed openly. "Earth," the Kralth said, his voice booming through the chamber. "A tiny world in an unremarkable system. What could you possibly offer us?" Lauren kept her expression neutral. "We offer our courage, our determination, our willingness to stand against tyranny wherever we find it." "Empty words," said another representative, a floating creature covered in tentacles. "Your species has been in space for barely 20 years. You have no experience with galactic warfare, no understanding of our politics. You are children playing with toys you do not understand." "We understand more than you think," Lauren replied. "We understand what it means to fight for survival. We understand sacrifice. We understand that freedom is never free." The council chairman, an ancient being whose species name humans could not pronounce, raised one appendage for silence. "Ambassador Hayes, your passion is noted. But the Council has reviewed Earth's history. Your species has spent most of its existence at war with itself. Millions dead in conflicts over land, resources, ideology. You ask us to trust warriors who cannot even keep peace on their own world." Lauren took a breath. She had expected this argument. "You are correct that humanity's history is violent. We do not deny our past. But we have learned from it. We have grown. Every species in this chamber has a history of conflict. The difference is that we acknowledge ours." The Kralth representative stood, his armor servos whining with the motion. "Your world is weak. Your people are soft. You come from a planet with comfortable temperatures, abundant food, gentle gravity. You have never faced real hardship. Real predators, real danger." Several other representatives murmured agreement. Earth was classified as a Class 7 world. Pleasant, easy, safe. The kind of world that produced philosophers and artists. Not warriors. Lauren smiled. It was not a friendly expression. I invite any council member to visit Earth and call it comfortable. Spend a night in our deserts, where temperatures can kill in hours. Swim in our oceans, where creatures larger than most ships hunt in the dark. Climb our mountains, where the air is so thin you cannot breathe. Earth has killed more humans than all our wars combined. We did not conquer our world. We survived it. The chairman considered her words. Even so, survival of one world does not prepare you for the galaxy. The Kralth Empire alone controls 300 systems. They have weapons that can crack planets, armies that number in the billions. What could humanity do against such power? We could try, Lauren said simply. And we would never stop trying. That is what you need to understand about humans. We do not know how to quit. We do not know how to surrender. When something is worth fighting for, we fight until there is nothing left to fight with. And then we fight some more. The council session ended with no decision. Humanity's petition was tabled for further review. Lauren left the chamber knowing that Earth would not be joining the Galactic Defense Coalition. Not today. Probably not ever. The galaxy saw humans as irrelevant, harmless, beneath notice. 3 months later, the Kralth invaded Talveen, and everything changed. The Kralth tank fired its main cannon. The explosive shell hit the building behind Jake's position, bringing down tons of rubble. Dust and smoke filled the air. The blast wave knocked Lyra off her feet. Jake pulled her up before she hit the ground. Stay close. That thing is the priority target. Katie was already working on it. She had deployed a small launcher from her backpack and loaded it with a missile that looked too small to do any damage. She aimed carefully, waiting for the tank to advance into range. Ryan provided covering fire, his rifle spitting death at any Kralth soldier who tried to rush their position. The energy barrier was holding, but barely. Plasma bolts were hammering it from all sides. It would fail soon. Lyra fired her captured rifle at the advancing soldiers. Her shots were not as accurate as the humans, but she was learning. Aim for center mass. Short bursts. Conserve ammunition. Jake had taught her this in between firefights. He was a good teacher. The tank rolled closer. Its main cannon began charging for another shot. If it fired again, the blast would kill them all. Katie took a breath, steadied herself, and fired the missile. The projectile left the launcher with a soft hiss. It seemed to move slowly, drifting through the air like a lazy insect. Then it struck the tank's front armor, and everything changed. The explosion was not large. No dramatic fireball. Just a small burst of white light. But the tank stopped moving. Smoke poured from its hatches. A moment later, the ammunition inside cooked off, and the entire vehicle came apart in a secondary explosion. Armor-piercing charge, Jake explained to Lyra. Melts through defenses and turns everything inside to paste. Not pretty, but effective. Your weapons are very advanced, Lyra said. Jake shook his head. Not really. Human weapons are fairly simple compared to most galactic technology. We just use them better. A plasma bolt hit the ground near them. Ryan returned fire and dropped the shooter. The Kralth were getting more cautious now. They had lost too many soldiers rushing the human position. They were starting to adapt. During a brief lull in the fighting, Lyra found herself next to Jake behind cover. He was checking his ammunition and reloading. The process was smooth and automatic. He had done this thousands of times before. Can I ask you something? Lyra said. Sure, Jake replied, not looking up from his work. Where are you from? What is Earth like? Jake paused, his helmet turned toward her. Earth is beautiful and terrible. It has places that will take your breath away with their beauty, and places that will just take your breath and kill you. Everything on our world evolved to survive, to compete, to fight. Even the plants have thorns and poisons. It sounds dangerous. It is, Jake agreed. Earth has more ways to kill you than any world should. But it made us strong, made us adaptable. We learned to work together because we had to. No human survives alone on Earth. We need each other. Is that why you help us? Lyra asked. Because humans need each other? Jake loaded a fresh power cell into his rifle. Partly. But it is more than that. Humans have this thing we call pack bonding. We form connections with others. With our families, our friends, our teams, and once you are part of our pack, we will die before we let anything hurt you. But we are not human, Lyra pointed out. We are not your pack. Does not matter, Jake said. We saw those kids. We saw you protecting them. That made you pack. Simple as that. Lyra did not fully understand. But she felt something warm in her chest at his words. These humans had come from nowhere. They owed the Talveen nothing, but they were here, fighting and bleeding, because it was the right thing to do. Katie suddenly called out a warning. Movement on all sides. They are surrounding us. Ryan swore. Where is that fire support? We could really use it. Right about now. Jake checked a small display on his wrist. 2 minutes out. We just need to hold for 2 more minutes. A Kralth voice boomed across the battlefield. It was the commander, speaking through loudspeakers. Humans, you fight well. Better than expected. But this is foolish. You cannot win. Withdraw now, and we will let you leave. Stay and you will die with these animals. Jake's response was to fire 3 shots that destroyed the speakers. That is our answer. The Kralth attacked from every direction at once. At least 40 soldiers, all firing at once. The energy barrier shattered completely. Plasma bolts tore through the air. Jake, Ryan, and Katie formed a triangle around the children, each covering a different direction. Lyra stood with them, firing until her captured rifle ran dry, then fighting with the knife Jake had given her. A Kralth soldier got through the defensive line. He raised his weapon to fire at one of the children. Lyra threw herself forward and drove the knife into his neck. They fell together. She pulled the blade free and stabbed again. And again, until the soldier stopped moving. When she looked up, Katie was standing over her, providing cover. The human medic had taken a plasma bolt to the shoulder. Her armor was blackened and smoking. But she was still fighting. Still standing, still protecting. Nice work, Katie said through gritted teeth. Above them, the sky lit up with fire. The HCDF Valiant had arrived. The human ship screamed past at low altitude, its weapons blazing. Missiles rained down on the Kralth positions. The entire street erupted in explosions. The Kralth broke. For the first time since the battle began, they retreated. They ran. Some threw down their weapons in their panic. Their commander shouted orders. But no one listened. The humans had broken them. Jake lowered his rifle and took a breath. Well, that was close. Ryan laughed, the sound half mad with relief. You always say that. Katie slumped against a wall, holding her wounded shoulder. Someone want to remind me why we keep doing this? Because we are idiots, Ryan said. Because someone has to, Jake corrected. Lyra stood among them, covered in dust and blood, holding a knife that was not hers, and realized something. The galaxy did not understand humans. They saw Earth as weak, saw humans as soft. They were wrong. Terribly. Completely wrong. And the Kralth had just learned that lesson the hard way. In the distance, she could hear Kralth communications cutting through the smoke. One phrase kept repeating, shouted with fear and panic. Deathworlders. Retreat. They are Deathworlders. Jake heard it too. He looked at Lyra, and she could hear the grin in his voice. I think they finally figured it out. The children were crying. Not from fear anymore, but from relief. Human medics moved among them with gentle hands, checking for injuries, offering water and food. One of the children, a small boy no older than 6, clung to Katie's leg, despite her protests, that she needed to treat her own wound. I am fine, Katie kept saying. Really, I am fine. But she was not fine. Lyra could see the pain in the way the human woman held herself. The plasma bolt had burned through her armor and into the muscle beneath. She needed proper medical treatment. But she refused to stop working until every child was checked and cared for. Jake watched this with something like pride in his posture. He had removed his helmet, and Lyra finally saw his face. He was younger than she expected, maybe 30 Earth years. His skin was dark, his eyes darker. A scar ran along his jaw. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than this one battle. More humans were arriving now. Drop pods hammered down from orbit every few minutes, each carrying more soldiers and equipment. A woman in officer's armor approached Jake and saluted. He returned the gesture with casual ease. "Sergeant Morrison," the woman said. Her voice carried authority. "Impressive work here. Command is very interested in your report." "Thank you, Lieutenant Grant," Jake replied. "Just doing our job." The woman, Sophie Grant, looked around at the destruction. At the dead, Kralth. At the children being tended by human medics. Her expression softened slightly. "A job well done. The Kralth are routing across the planet. We have them on the run." "Casualties?" Jake asked. His tone became more serious. Sophie's expression darkened. "Heavy. 3rd Platoon took a direct hit from orbital bombardment. 18 dead. Another 30 wounded. 5th Platoon lost their commander in close combat. The Kralth are not going quietly." Jake was silent for a moment. Lyra saw something pass across his face. Grief. She realized. These humans felt lost the same way her people did. They mourned their dead. "What are our orders?" Ryan asked, joining the conversation. Sophie pulled up a holographic display. "The Kralth are regrouping in orbit. They are planning one final push to wipe out the Talveen orbital defenses. If those fall, they can bombard the planet from space. Everything we fought for here will be meaningless. So we take the fight to them," Katie said. She had finally let a medic treat her shoulder, and now wore a fresh bandage under her damaged armor. "Exactly," Sophie confirmed. "We are assembling a strike team to board their flagship, take the command ship, and the rest of their fleet will fold. It is a suicide mission. Command is asking for volunteers only." "I volunteer," Jake said immediately. "Same here," Ryan added. Katie nodded. "Count me in." Sophie looked at each of them and sighed. "I knew you would say that. All of you are crazy." She paused. "Which is why I also volunteered. We ship out in 6 hours. Until then, get some rest, get some food. We have a long day ahead." The humans dispersed to their assigned tasks. Lyra stood alone among the ruins, suddenly aware of how quiet everything had become. The battle was over, but she felt no relief. Just emptiness. She needed to find her family, her home. She needed to know what was left of her life. The walk through the city was like walking through a graveyard. Buildings she had known since childhood were reduced to rubble. Streets where she had played as a child were craters. Bodies lay everywhere, covered in sheets by human recovery teams. So many dead, so much destruction. Lyra's family home was in the northern district, or had been. When she arrived, she found only ruins. The 3-story building where she had grown up was now a pile of broken stone and twisted metal. Her hands shook as she began to dig through the debris, searching for any sign of her parents. Her sister, Lyra. She spun around and saw her sister running toward her. They collided in a fierce embrace, both crying, both alive. Her parents emerged from a temporary shelter nearby. They were hurt, bruised, but alive. All of them had survived. "We thought you were dead," her mother said, touching Lyra's face with trembling hands. "We heard that your unit was wiped out." "I should be dead," Lyra admitted. "But the humans saved me. They saved all of us." Her father looked toward where human soldiers were working to clear debris and rescue survivors. "We owe them everything," he said quietly. Lyra stayed with her family for an hour, but she could not remain. There was something she needed to do. She returned to the street, where she had made her stand. The bodies had been removed, but the evidence of battle remained. Scorch marks, broken weapons, and scattered across the ground, the pieces of her spear. She knelt and began gathering the fragments. The metal was cold now, the energy core completely dark. 5 generations of her family had carried this weapon, Now, it was just broken pieces in her hands. That was a good spear, a voice said behind her. Lyra turned and saw Jake. He had his helmet off, his rifle slung across his back. He knelt beside her and helped gather the pieces. It was all I had left of my grandmother, Lyra said. She died defending our people from raiders when I was young. My mother gave me this spear and told me to make her proud. You did, Jake said. I saw you fight. Saw you refuse to give up even when everything was lost. Your grandmother would be very proud. They worked in silence for a while, collecting every fragment they could find. Jake examined the pieces with interest, turning them over in his hands. The craftsmanship is excellent, he said. The energy core is damaged beyond repair, but the metalwork is beautiful. Your people have skilled artisans. Had, Lyra corrected bitterly. The Krauth destroyed our forge district. Most of our craftspeople are dead. Jake looked at her. We have engineers on the Valiant. They can work with any metal. If you want, we could rebuild this. Not exactly the same, but something new. Something that honors what it was. Lyra felt tears threatening again. Why do you keep helping us? You have already done so much. Jake was quiet for a moment. He sat down on a piece of rubble and gestured for Lyra to join him. She did. 5 years ago, he said. I was part of a unit deployed to a human colony on the frontier. The colony was attacked by pirates. We arrived too late. Most of the colonists were dead, but we found survivors. Children hiding in the ruins, just like today. We got them out, but we lost half our team doing it. He paused, his eyes distant. After that, my commander asked me why we took such risks for strangers. I told him the same thing I am telling you, because if we do not help when we can, then what is the point? What good is all our strength and technology if we only use it for ourselves? Your commander, Lyra asked. What did he say? Jake smiled slightly. He said I was an idiot and promoted me to sergeant. Been doing this ever since. Lyra looked at the broken pieces of her spear in her hands. Then she looked at Jake, this human who had fallen from the sky to save her life. Who asked for nothing in return. Who fought because it was right, not because it was easy. I want to come with you, she said. To the flagship. I want to help finish this. Jake shook his head. No, you should stay here. Be with your family. They need you. My people need me to fight, Lyra insisted. The Krauth took everything from us. I will not let them escape without paying for what they have done. It is a suicide mission, Jake warned. We might not come back. Then I will die with honor, Lyra said. Like my grandmother. Like all the warriors of my line. Please. Let me stand with you one more time. Jake studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and offered his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. All right, he said. But you are going to need better equipment than a knife. Come on. Let us get you properly armed. If you are going to fight alongside humans, you should look the part. They walked together through the ruined city as the sun began to set. Above them, in orbit, the Krauth fleet gathered for their final assault. Somewhere up there was a flagship full of enemy soldiers, a command deck that needed to be taken, a war that needed to be ended. Lyra touched the broken pieces of her spear, now safely stored in a pouch on her belt. Soon they would be reforged, made new, made stronger. Just like her, the human ship Valiant hung in orbit like a dark promise. Its weapons were ready, its soldiers prepared. And now, it had one more volunteer joining the mission, a Talveen warrior with everything to lose and nothing left to fear. Sophie was waiting at the loading bay when they arrived. She looked at Lyra with surprise, then at Jake with understanding. Another volunteer? Sophie asked. Another volunteer, Jake confirmed. Sophie nodded. Welcome to the team. We launch in 4 hours. Get some rest while you can. The hard part is just beginning. Lyra looked up at the stars, where the Krauth fleet waited. She thought of her broken spear, her dead comrades, her ruined city. Her people who needed hope. "I am ready," she said. And she was. The drop pod shook violently as it punched through the Kralth flagship's shields. Lyra was strapped into a seat between Jake and Ryan, wearing human combat armor that had been hastily modified to fit her smaller frame. The armor felt strange, too heavy, too advanced. But it worked. 30 seconds to impact, Sophie announced from the pilot seat. She was guiding their pod through a storm of defensive fire. Explosions lit up the small windows. The entire pod rang like a bell each time enemy weapons hit their shields. Katie checked her rifle for the 10th time. "I hate boarding actions. Give me a good ground battle any day." "Where is the fun in that?" Ryan asked, grinning despite the situation. "You have a very strange definition of fun," Katie replied. The pod slammed into the flagship's hull with bone-jarring force. Cutting lasers activated automatically, burning through the armored plating. Red-hot metal peeled away like paper. The boarding hatch blew inward with a blast of explosive charges. Jake was first through. His rifle came up and fired 3 times before Lyra even unbuckled her harness. 3 dead Kralth hit the floor before the alarm even started blaring. "Move! Move! Move!" Sophie shouted. They poured into the flagship in a tight formation. The corridor was narrow and dark, designed for Kralth physiology. The humans had to crouch slightly. Lyra fit better, being shorter. She stayed close to Jake like he had taught her. More Kralth soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. The space erupted with weapons fire. Plasma bolts and human bullets crossed in the air, creating deadly patterns of light. Jake and Ryan advanced while Sophie and Katie provided covering fire. Lyra stayed in the middle, learning, watching, waiting for her moment. A Kralth soldier broke through their line, moving faster than expected. He raised a blade to strike Katie from behind. Lyra did not think. She just moved. The combat knife Jake had given her found the gap in the soldier's armor. Right at the base of the skull, he dropped without a sound. "Nice," Katie said without looking back. Getting the hang of this, they pushed deeper into the ship. The corridors were a maze of metal and shadow. Kralth defenders appeared from side passages, from hidden doorways, from overhead hatches. The humans cut through them like they were nothing. Every movement was practiced, every shot placed with precision. They had done this before, many times, but this time was different. The Kralth were not running. They were defending their flagship with desperate fury. And there were so many of them. Jake's team linked up with 2 other boarding parties. Now there were 15 humans and 1 Talveen, all pushing toward the command deck. The ship's artificial gravity failed twice, sending them floating until emergency systems kicked in. Life support started failing in sections they had already passed through. The flagship was dying around them. They reached a massive sealed door. The command deck lay beyond. Sophie placed explosive charges, while the others formed a defensive perimeter. Kralth soldiers were converging from all directions. This was the last stand. Win here or die here. The charges detonated. The door blew inward. Jake threw flash grenades through the opening. The humans rushed in before the defenders could recover. The command deck was enormous, designed to coordinate an entire fleet. Dozens of Kralth officers worked at control stations. In the center, on a raised platform, stood the commander, the same commander who had tried to kill Lyra in the street, who had mocked her as her spear broke, who had laughed as she fell to her knees. He was not laughing now. His armor was even more impressive here. Surrounded by his own people. Weapons, systems built into every surface. Energy shields crackling around him. He drew a massive blade from his back, the weapon humming with power. "Humans," he snarled. "You should have stayed on your pathetic little world. Now you die in the void where no one will remember you." Jake did not bother responding. He just opened fire. So did everyone else. The command deck turned into a storm of violence. Kralth officers fell at their stations. Guards rushed to protect their commander. Humans and Kralth clashed in brutal close combat. The commander's shields held against the first wave of fire. He charged toward Jake, his blade raised. Jake dodged to the side, and Ryan hit the commander from the other direction. The blade missed by inches. Ryan's rifle fired point-blank into the commander's side. The shields flared but held. Sophie moved to flank, while Katie provided supporting fire. They were coordinating without speaking, each human instinctively knowing where the others would be. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Lyra saw her opening. While the commander was focused on Jake and Ryan, she darted in low. Her knife found a gap in his leg armor, right behind the knee. She drove the blade in deep and twisted. The commander roared in pain and spun toward her. His massive hand caught her across the chest, throwing her backward. She hit a control console hard enough to crack the screen. Her vision went white with pain. Jake was there instantly, standing between her and the commander. His rifle was empty, discarded. He drew his own combat blade and squared off against the alien warrior. They circled each other like predators. The commander struck first. His blade came down with enough force to split stone. Jake was not there anymore. He moved like water, flowing around the attack. His blade flicked out, opening a cut in the commander's arm, then another in his side. Small wounds, but they added up. "You cannot win, human," the commander gasped. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy you." "Your fleet?" Jake said calmly. "Just received new orders." Sophie was at the main control console, fingers flying over alien controls. Behind them, through the massive view screens, the Krauth fleet was visible. Ship after ship was powering down weapons, turning away from the Talveen orbital platforms. The commander looked at his fleet in disbelief. "What have you done?" "We captured your flagship," Sophie explained, not looking up from her work. "Which means we control your command codes. Your fleet thinks you ordered them to stand down. By the time they figure out something is wrong, it will be too late." The commander's shields finally failed. He stood there, wounded and beaten, his blade lowered. Around the command deck, the surviving Krauth officers were surrendering. The battle was over. Jake kept his blade ready but did not strike. "It is finished. You have lost. Surrender, and your people will be treated with honor. Keep fighting, and you all die here." The commander looked at Jake for a long moment. Then his blade clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees. "How?" he asked. "How did you beat us? We are stronger. We have better weapons. Better ships. We have conquered hundreds of worlds." Jake finally lowered his blade. "You conquered hundreds of worlds," he said. "But you never faced anyone willing to die to stop you. That is the difference between taking and protecting. We protect, and we will die before we let you hurt anyone else." The commander had no response. Human soldiers moved in to secure the prisoners. Medical teams began treating the wounded, both human and Krauth. The fighting was truly over. Lyra pulled herself up from the broken console. Every part of her hurt, but she was alive. They had done it. Against all odds, they had actually done it. Katie appeared beside her with a medical scanner. "You have 3 cracked ribs and a concussion. You are going to feel terrible tomorrow." "Worth it," Lyra managed to say. The Krauth fleet surrendered within the hour. The Talveen orbital defenses held. The planet was saved. Across the galaxy, news spread fast. A minor species had defeated the Krauth Empire, and they had done it with help from humans. The Deathworlders, the newcomers everyone had dismissed as irrelevant. The Galactic Council was forced to grant humanity full membership. Their military credentials could no longer be questioned. Ambassador Lauren Hayes stood before the council again. But this time, no one was laughing. No one was mocking Earth. The representatives sat in respectful silence as she spoke about honor, courage, and the cost of freedom. 3 months after the battle, Lyra stood on the deck of the Valiant. She wore a new uniform, a combination of Talveen traditional design and human military styling. On her shoulder was a patch showing both species' symbols intertwined. She had been promoted to captain and assigned as permanent liaison to the human military. More importantly, she had a new weapon. Human engineers had taken the fragments of her broken spear and reforged them. The new spear was longer, stronger, incorporating human technology with Talveen craftsmanship. The energy core burned brighter than before, fueled by advanced human power cells. But it still carried her grandmother's legacy. Still held 5 generations of history in its metal. Jake found her looking out at the stars. He wore a new rank insignia himself, lieutenant now. Battlefield promotion for his actions on Talveen. Getting used to the new spear? He asked. Lyra spun it in her hands. The balance was perfect. It feels right. Better than before. Good, Jake said. You are going to need it. 6 months after the Kralth defeat, the Galactic Council received a distress signal. Another species was facing extinction. Another ruthless empire was expanding, crushing peaceful worlds under their boots. The council representatives debated what to do. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to sanction. None wanted to risk their own soldiers. Lyra stood before them, wearing her new uniform with pride. She had been invited to speak on behalf of the Talveen people, to share their experience, to tell the galaxy what had saved her world. Honorable council members, she said, her voice clear and strong. I understand your hesitation. War is terrible. The cost is high. But sometimes the cost of not acting is higher. I speak as someone who watched my world burn, who saw my people slaughtered, who stood alone against an army and waited to die. She paused, making eye contact with each representative. Then a human fell from the sky and asked if he could join the fight. He did not know me, did not know my people, had no reason to risk his life. But he did it anyway, because it was right, because someone needed help, because that is what humans do. The council chamber was silent. Every representative was listening now. You ask what should be done about this new threat, Lyra continued. You debate politics and sanctions. But there is a simpler answer. There are people who are dying right now. Children, like the ones I protected. Warriors like the ones I fought beside. Families like mine who are watching their homes burn. She straightened, her hand resting on her reforged spear. I have one question for this council. Shall I call the humans? The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives objected. Some supported. But Lyra noticed one thing. No one was laughing anymore. No one was dismissing Earth as irrelevant. The vote passed. The request was sent, far away, on a dozen human worlds and ships. Alarms began to sound. Soldiers grabbed their weapons. Ships powered their engines. Medics packed their supplies. Because somewhere in the galaxy, someone needed help. Someone needed protecting. Someone needed the one thing humans could always be counted on to provide: hope. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant with his team. Ryan, Katie, Sophie, and now Lyra. They looked at the star maps, at the distant world crying out for rescue. The mission would be dangerous. Many would not come back, but that had never stopped them before. Well, Jake said, loading his rifle. I guess we have work to do. Ryan grinned. When do we not? Katie checked her medical supplies. Just once I would like a quiet month. Where is the fun in that? Sophie asked. Lyra stood with them, her reforged spear in hand, and felt something she had not felt since before the Kralth came. She felt ready. She felt strong. She felt like she finally understood what it meant to be a warrior. Not the weapon you carried, not the battles you won, but the people you protected. The stands you made when no one else would. The Valiant jumped to faster than light speed, heading toward another fight. Another world that needed saving. Another chance to prove that courage existed in the galaxy. That some species would not stand by and watch innocents die. Humanity had answered the call. And they were not coming alone. Beside them stood the Talveen. And soon, others would join. Species that had been saved. Species that had learned what humans could teach them. That strength without compassion is nothing. That courage without cause is empty. That the galaxy did not belong to the ruthless or the powerful. It belonged to those brave enough to fight for it. Lyra looked at her reflection in the view screen. She saw herself in human armor, carrying a human knife and a reforged spear. She saw someone who had been broken and remade stronger. someone who had learned what it meant to stand with humans. She smiled. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans went to war. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for each other. For those who could not fight for themselves. For the simple, powerful belief that everyone deserved a chance to live free. And that was worth fighting for.